Genesis. Joseph dies at the end of Genesis. And so you're coming into this relationship between Joseph and the Egyptian leaders, the pharaohs, that they have a certain amount of thankfulness to him that we have learned so far. But things just changed. And that's why it's important to backtrack like that. It's like, well, wait, you had all these wonderful relationships, but all kinds of sinful stuff and disobedience going on, but God gave grace. He gave a covenant, and he's come through, and people finally realized, and all of that. And even the relationship between Egypt and the Israelites, there was a bit of thankfulness between them. And so we get to Exodus 1. And it reminds us of that just real quickly. And it starts off in chapter 1, verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel. Or Jacob, but the sons of Israel. And who went to Egypt with Jacob. And it's Reuben. And I'm not always going to read through everything, especially as we're talking about plagues and stuff like that. But I'm going to recount these names because I want you to remember these. And whenever I don't read it, you still go and read it. God will bring these names and situations back to your remembrance, but not if you don't read it. I take that back. One time he put something in my mind I hadn't even read yet. And then I read it. I was like, oh. Yeah, it's one of those moments. Okay, got to keep going. Okay, so here's the names. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Just it's overflowing. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came into power in Egypt. Now, why am I focused on that? Two things are happening here. First of all, you have an emphasis here on the growing number of Israelites, and do not let it slip your mind that it fails to recall the fact that God promised this would happen, and you're seeing it play itself out. God said, you will have so many descendants you won't be able to count. And they're just filling up the land, literally filling up the land. And then you see this new king. Now, the footnote talks about who this might have been. It's the name Moses, or perhaps Amenhotep the first, his successor. Moses reunited Egypt by defeating Hyksos, a Semitic people who had invaded and dominated Egypt for 150 years. Okay, so that might explain some things. But he did not personally know Joseph, so there was no history of gratitude that had been built through what happened with Egypt and Joseph. And now Joseph's gone, so there's no one to recount it anyway. And his whole generation has died with him, brothers and that whole generation. And so the reason that you start seeing this king starting to say, he says, come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So his concern is there is a perceived military threat here, like an overthrow threat here. And daughters could be assimilated into Egyptian society and be used as servants and wives. But the men, they needed to wipe them out because they could possibly go to war and take over. And so we're going to see how they deal with boys as far as trying to kill them. But first, they put slave masters over the people to oppress them and to force labor. So that's where we're getting this laborious situation where the Israelites, who were once even had Egyptian slaves, we talk about, now they are the ones enslaved, and not just enslaved. It says, so the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites, so they worked them ruthlessly in verse 13. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. It says it over and over. The king of Egypt said to Hebrew midwives, that's the ones that would help birth children, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah. When you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on delivery stool, if you see a baby, literally a delivery stool is sitting, in between the woman's legs, watching the baby come out and helping her to get to that point and birth the baby safely. But if you see that the baby's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. Like I said, they could use her. They could use her as a wife, or they could use her as a servant. But they didn't want to let the boys grow. And so he told them, do not let the boys live. And the women feared God. The midwives feared God. And so they didn't do what the king of Egypt told them to do. And he summoned them and he said, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? And they said, it's always interesting, while sometimes people say things back to God, it actually is true, but it's lying too. But it kind of spared their lives. And they answered the Pharaoh. They said, it's true. Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives can arrive. Those babies pop out before we can even get there. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives had feared God, that's why he gave them families of their own. I wonder if they kept midwiving too while they even had their own kids. Then Pharaoh gave his order to all the people, every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Isn't that an interesting flip of events? Now, because women weren't really valued before that, but now they're being allowed to live, but really only because of their labor value and ability to have children and serve. So now the birth of Moses. Let's get into that in chapter 2. I know I've already covered this, but we're going to cover it again. Now, a man in the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and I don't know that it says in any footnote who that man is. But his name is referenced in other parts of the Bible. And we'll get to that. Anyway, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. So now you have a 3-month-old. And when she could hide him no more, after all, he's a little boy kid, and I don't know if she tried to make him look like a girl or act like a girl, just keep him silent and hidden, or what he did. She got a papyrus basket and coated it with tar and pitch, making it waterproof. And then she placed the child in it and put it on the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Don't ignore that. She actually was following the law to put the child in the Nile. She just didn't kill it. She didn't throw him in and let him drown. She put him in a way that he didn't drown. And her sister stood at a distance to see what would happen. In other words, she didn't just do that. They had a plan. Who is this wife? This wife, her name is what we get, and we see the name in Exodus 6:20, and her name is Jochebed, and she's very resourceful. And because she was, she circumvented the Pharaoh's plan to kill the man that would change Jewish history. The change of history here is what we're fixing to have happen. It's amazing what we're fixing to read about. And the fact that this woman was so resourceful, she saved a nation. We attribute it to Moses and Aaron, and certainly they did what God told them to do. But if it weren't for Jochebed being resourceful, smart, faithful, trusting God, that was a tough thing to do. And also her sister. I don't know that we get her name. I don't see it. She stood by and watched. Well, you know what that means? She stood by the Nile River and made sure. When I think of the Nile, I'm thinking crocodiles. She made sure this child made it okay. And hippopotamus that were considered one of the most dangerous animals on the earth. Did you know that? Anyway, that's not the Bible. But anyway, all right. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking on the riverbank. Saw the baby among the reeds. She opened it, saw the baby. He was crying. She felt sorry for him. We're now down in chapter 2, verse 6, and she said, "This is one of those Hebrew babies." She's thinking that got thrown in the Nile, or put in the Nile, or whatever. And so now I'm starting to think, was it the current of the Nile? Was it that they threw them actually in the water and they drowned? Was it that there was alligators and hippopotamuses that might eat them? I mean, the point is, this was a dangerous place for a baby to be, and she felt sorry for it. And then the sister. Then the sister shows up and helps out. Do y'all know that we are sisters helping out to each other? We even have some males on here like Ryan and his wife Amber that are on here and watch and listen to the Word of God. Not that I'm a preacher or teacher over a man. You're just listening to the Word of God be read. And but I like that it says, and then the sister. Then his sister. That should be a whole nother chapter right there. But anyway, asked the Pharaoh's daughter, "Hey, shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse that baby for you?" It was planned. This is very well planned. Very good strategy. Very good organization. These women showed uncanny business skills, organizational skills, strategic planning of a warrior. They knew what to do to make sure this worked out how it should. And this was God at work. There's just no way this could have worked as perfectly if it hadn't been God. And it is very clear that it is her faith in God that caused Jochebed and her sister to do it this way. Because it was certainly very dangerous to take this chance. Do you get that? And so the Pharaoh's daughter said, "Yes, go." So she went and got the baby's mother. "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." And so the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she drew him out of the water. And the word Moses means to draw out. And I wonder if he also draw him out of Egypt.